Forbidden love between father-in-law and daughter-in-law, a secret that exploded on a fateful night. A seemingly peaceful life can be turned upside down in a single moment. Riley, a devoted wife and mother of two, was used to her routine in their small home nestled near the forest in Wyoming. But the unexpected arrival of Daniel, her distant and stoic father-in-law, ignited a spark she never anticipated. A glance, a heavy silence, and a forbidden attraction slowly took root, crossing boundaries that should never have been crossed. Amidst ordinary family dinners, stolen glances, and moments of palpable tension, a dangerous secret began to unfold. And then came that fateful night, a night when Henry, her husband, unexpectedly returned home early, and everything unraveled into a whirlwind of betrayal and pain. Riley not only lost her family but found herself trapped in a web of passion and guilt that she could no longer escape. Can Riley face the consequences of her actions? And where will this tumultuous relationship with Daniel ultimately lead them? This story not only lays bare the vulnerabilities of the human heart but also asks the haunting question: can we ever atone for our mistakes when we've lost everything? It started subtly, a fleeting sensation, but grew stronger, consuming me entirely. That was how I felt the evening Daniel, my husband's father, visited. I am Riley, a woman living a quiet life in a small Wyoming town with my husband Henry and our two children. Our home, nestled beside the forest, once felt like a haven. Yet now, I realize the deepest secrets hide not among the trees but within those we hold dear. Daniel's visit wasn't entirely unannounced, but his presence felt different this time. His rare visits, often interrupted by his demanding job out of state, never felt unsettling until that night. As I welcomed him at the door, an inexplicable unease crept over me. Daniel's typically reserved demeanor masked something new, an intensity in his eyes that made me pause. Dinner passed uneventfully. Henry talked about work while the children slept. The fire crackled softly, the only witness to our quiet gathering. Yet Daniel's presence loomed larger than words. I avoided his gaze, but it felt like an invisible thread was pulling me toward him. An unspoken game had begun, silent, but undeniably real. Every time our eyes met, I felt a magnetic pull, unsettling and electric. His gaze hinted at something beyond curiosity, something deeper, something forbidden. His subtle smile masked secrets I couldn't decipher, and the air between us grew heavier with tension. As night deepened, shadows lengthened across the room. When Henry suggested we retire, an unexpected pang of disappointment struck me. I wanted to stay, to linger in the charged atmosphere, but I couldn't allow that. Silently, I followed Henry upstairs, leaving Daniel alone in the dim light. Sleep refused to come. I tossed and turned, haunted by Daniel's gaze and calm presence. His voice echoed in my mind, impossible to silence. I told myself it was fatigue, that I was imagining things. But deep down, something stirred, a forbidden desire I dared not name. In the stillness of the night, I lay awake, teetering on the edge of something that could shatter everything I knew. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. Over breakfast, Henry and I exchanged casual plans. But Daniel's gaze lingered, sharp and unsettling. It felt like a silent game, rules unspoken yet fully understood. Once Henry left for work and the children headed to school, the house fell into a haunting stillness. Only the wind outside rustled through the trees, a deceptive calmness that masked the storm within me. I busied myself with chores. But my mind betrayed me. Drifting back to him, I strained to hear his footsteps, subconsciously anticipating his presence. When Daniel finally entered the kitchen, the air thickened. His silent proximity ignited a flicker of anxiety in my chest. I didn't dare turn around. Yet I sensed him, closer than comfort allowed. "Riley." His voice, low and deliberate, sent a shiver racing down my spine. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes, dark, enigmatic, knowing. We stood in tense silence, something unspoken sparking between us. This was no longer a simple bond between in-laws, it was something deeper. Forbidden, yet undeniably magnetic. I wanted to speak, to shatter the fragile tension. But words failed me. His steady breath filled the space between us, drawing me into a quiet storm. I knew this pull was dangerous. A slow burn that could consume everything. Yet, I couldn't step away. Daniel turned first, breaking the moment. Still, the weight of his presence lingered, haunting every thought. The rest of the day passed in a haze, each sound and shadow reminding me of him. It was the calm before a storm I could no longer ignore. That day passed, leaving an undeniable sense that something had shifted within me. I felt the weight of it, a dangerous pull I couldn't resist. My life appeared unchanged on the surface, but beneath it, a storm brewed, subtle yet unrelenting. All day, I sought distractions in chores, cleaning, cooking, anything to escape the thoughts that kept circling back to Daniel. Yet solitude betrayed me, and his image lingered, stirring an agitation I couldn't explain. It felt as though an invisible net was tightening around me, growing stronger with every passing hour. By evening, when Henry returned from work, I forced myself to act normal. We sat at dinner, discussing trivial matters. But my mind was elsewhere. My gaze drifted toward Daniel, who, despite his silence, seemed attuned to the unspoken tension between us. His calm presence only deepened the intrigue, as if he awaited a move I wasn't ready to make. After dinner, Henry suggested a walk. I declined, citing exhaustion. He kissed my forehead and left, leaving me alone with Daniel. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and I felt a tremor of unease mixed with something I dared not name. "Riley." Daniel's voice cut through the silence, calm but insistent. "You've changed. Is everything all right?" His words struck a chord, and for a moment, I was frozen. The weight of his question hung between us, undeniable and impossible to ignore. That simple question unsettled me, tightening a knot of unease in my chest. How could I admit to feelings I barely understood? His words, laden with concern, caught me off guard, stirring something I didn't want to acknowledge. "Yes. Everything is fine," I replied, masking my turmoil. "Just a bit tired." Daniel's silence spoke volumes. His lingering gaze was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. The room's stillness grew charged, thick with tension neither of us dared to breach. My pulse quickened. The space felt suffocating, and I stood abruptly, avoiding his eyes. "I'm going to get some fresh air," I muttered, heading for the door. Outside, the cool night air enveloped me, contrasting with the heat within. The forest loomed, serene and quiet, I walked along a narrow path, desperate to calm the storm in my mind. Why did Daniel, a man once distant, now spark such turmoil in me? No answers came. Only confusion. I reached a small pond. Its surface dark and still, reflecting scattered stars. Sitting on a worn bench, I closed my eyes, letting the solitude soothe me. For a moment, I felt peace. Then, footsteps shattered the calm. My body tensed. Turning, I saw Daniel approaching. He sat beside me without a word. His silent presence was magnetic, reigniting the chaos I'd tried to escape. Despite my instincts, I stayed, caught in the pull of something I couldn't name, a spark I couldn't extinguish. We sat in silence, side by side. The stillness around us thick and heavy, almost alive. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the kind of silence that held secrets, unspoken words, and unacknowledged truths. Between us, an invisible current pulsed, brushing against my skin and making my heart race. A battle raged within me, the instinct to flee from the intensity of this moment and the paralyzing fear of what I'd lose if I left. Daniel turned his head, his movements deliberate, his eyes locked onto mine. And I couldn't look away. In his gaze, I saw the reflection of my own feelings, raw, undeniable, and dangerous. He said nothing, but that look spoke volumes. My breath quickened, the sound almost deafening in the still night air. I knew he could hear it, but I couldn't help it. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, the pull of the unknown too powerful to resist. Fear prickled at my chest. If I stayed, I would lose control, and there would be no turning back. Sensing my turmoil, Daniel broke the connection first. His eyes turned toward the dark, glassy surface of the pond, and the tension between us began to dissolve. Relief washed over me, followed by sharp disappointment. I wanted him to close the distance, to give in to the spark between us. But perhaps he knew, better than I did, how dangerous that fire could be. "It's peaceful here," he said, his voice calm, as though nothing had happened. "Yes," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "A good place to think." He glanced at me again, his gaze softer now, but no less intense. It was a promise, a warning, I wasn't sure which. And I knew, with startling clarity, that this was just the beginning. We lingered a while longer, unwilling to leave but unable to stay. The night air grew colder, and finally, I stood. Daniel rose with me, and together, we walked back to the house in silence. The quiet between us had shifted, it was no longer empty but charged, alive with everything we hadn't said. Inside, the house was still. Henry was already asleep, his soft breathing steady and rhythmic. I slipped into bed, the cold night air still clinging to my skin, and closed my eyes. But sleep was impossible. Every time I tried to quiet my mind, Daniel's eyes appeared in the darkness behind my lids, holding me captive all over again. I lay there, listening to Henry's breathing, feeling the weight of what had begun pressing down on me. This night had changed everything. The spark between us was too strong to ignore, too dangerous to pursue, but I couldn't avoid it anymore. Whatever came next, I knew my life would never be the same again. The morning light filtered through the curtains, but the memories of the forest clung to me like shadows. It wasn't a dream, I could still feel the echo of Daniel's voice. The way his eyes held mine by the pond. And the invisible bond that tethered us. Everything around me seemed sharper. More vivid. As though his presence had awakened something in me I hadn't known existed. Henry had left early for work. The house falling into a tense, expectant quiet. Alone with Daniel. The air felt heavy. Charged with an energy I couldn't escape. I threw myself into chores. Scrubbing surfaces that gleamed and folding clothes already neat. But none of it dulled the acute awareness of him nearby. His footsteps echoed softly through the halls. A sound that both unsettled and drew me. Every glance he cast in my direction sent a spark racing through me. A silent reminder of what had passed between us. The night at the pond lingered in every breath. Every thought. Making it impossible to focus. As the day stretched on, I avoided him. I knew that if we were alone again, the fragile thread of restraint would snap. But avoiding him only heightened the tension. Like a storm building just beyond the horizon. By evening, the sky was a blaze of gold and crimson. The light spilling into the house like fire. His voice broke the stillness. Calm and deliberate. "Riley," he called from the living room. I hesitated. My heart pounding as I stepped toward the sound. He stood by the window. Bathed in the glow of the setting sun. His silhouette sharp yet softened by the light. His head turned slightly as I entered. His eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made the air between us seem tangible. "Why are you avoiding me?" he asked. His voice low but firm. The question struck like lightning. My breath hitched. And I felt my carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble. "I'm not." I lied. Though the quiver in my voice betrayed me. "Yes. You are," he said. Stepping closer. His gaze softened. But there was no mistaking the determination in his eyes. "Why?" I took a shaky breath. The words spilling out before I could stop them. "Because I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" His voice was quieter now. A whisper that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Of this," I said, gesturing between us. "Of what it means. Of what will destroy if we give in." Daniel closed the distance between us. His presence overwhelming. His hand brushed mine. A light touch that sent a shiver through me. The silence between us was deafening. Charged with the unspoken truth we could no longer ignore. "You feel it too," he said. His voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Unable to deny it any longer. His hand rose to cup my cheek. His touch tender and electrifying. My breath caught as I leaned into him. My resolve shattering under the weight of his gaze. Time seemed to slow as he leaned in. His lips brushing mine with a gentleness that ignited something fierce within me. It wasn't just a kiss, it was an admission. A release. A surrender. His lips were soft and warm. His touch anchoring me as the world fell away. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the rules we were breaking. Not the consequences we would face. There was only him. And for the first time, I let myself feel it fully. Without fear or hesitation. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong. But I couldn't stop. Daniel pulled me closer. His arms wrapping around me as if anchoring me from the abyss I'd willingly plunged into. The kiss was long. Deep. And electrified by a passion we'd hidden for so long. I responded with equal fervor. My hands clutching his shirt as if grounding myself. His touch ignited a fire within me. A desire I couldn't suppress. I knew it was wrong. knew this would change everything. But at that moment, nothing mattered except the man standing before me. When we finally broke apart, the world around us seemed to hold its breath. My lips burned from his kiss. My heart raced as though I'd just run a marathon. His eyes met mine. Conflicted. Questioning. Yet unyielding. "Riley," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We shouldn't." I didn't let him finish. Pulling him closer, our lips met again. This time even more passionately. As if making up for lost time. His arms tightened around me. His touch sending shivers through my body. It felt inevitable. Unstoppable, a moment we had both secretly longed for but feared to admit. When we pulled away again, the silence was deafening. My chest heaved as I struggled to catch my breath. His gaze held mine. A mixture of passion and regret flickering in his eyes. "We can't do this," he said softly. "I know," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. We both knew there was no undoing what had just happened. This kiss, this moment, was a point of no return. The tension between us hung heavy. Unspoken yet palpable. Finally, Daniel stepped back. His hands falling to his sides. "We need to think about this," he said. I nodded, unable to form a coherent response. My lips still tingled. My heart still raced. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. As he walked away, leaving me standing alone in the thick silence, I felt the weight of what we'd done settle over me. This kiss had changed everything. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I was certain of one thing: we could never go back. After our lips finally parted, the room plunged into a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. I stood across from Daniel, my thoughts spiraling. In one impulsive moment, everything familiar in my life had unraveled into chaos. Daniel stepped back, the movement small yet decisive, as if putting an invisible wall between us. His eyes flitted around, refusing to meet mine. But I could see it, the guilt, the regret, the undeniable pull that neither of us could fully escape. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "We need to talk. This shouldn't have happened. We both know that." He was right. Of course. He was. But even as I nodded, a pang of longing coursed through me. Betraying the truth I didn't dare say aloud, I didn't regret it. "I know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But, what now?" His gaze met mine. And for a moment, it felt like the room tilted. In his eyes, I saw the same storm raging within me: anguish, confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. He opened his mouth to answer, but the sound of the front door opening shattered our fragile bubble of stolen intimacy. "Riley, I'm home." Henry's voice rang out, warm and familiar. Utterly unaware of what he'd interrupted, panic flooded my veins. I felt cold sweat prickling my skin, and my heart thundered in my chest. Daniel straightened instantly, his face transforming into a mask of composure. It was terrifying how effortlessly he could hide everything. Henry stepped into the room, smiling as he walked toward me. "Hi, darling," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His affection was routine, comforting, and suffocating. I forced a smile. "Hi," I said softly, my voice a fragile thread barely holding me together. "Everything okay?" Henry asked, his eyes scanning my face briefly before diving into stories about his day. Daniel stood in the corner, quiet and still, his presence like a shadow cast over the room. After a few minutes, he spoke. His tone clipped but polite. "I think I'll head out for a bit. I need some air." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and left, his retreat feeling like a finality I wasn't ready to face. Henry continued talking, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I nodded at his words, pretending to listen. But my thoughts were elsewhere, caught in the memory of a kiss that shouldn't have happened. But did. What now? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as guilt and desire coiled tightly around my heart. The evening unfolded in an uneasy stillness. I laughed, spoke, and moved like nothing was wrong. Yet my thoughts betrayed me. They circled back to Daniel, his touch, his kiss, burning like a hidden ember in my soul. Across from me, Henry smiled contentedly, oblivious to the storm raging within. We watched a movie, shared stories over dinner, and talked about the mundane. But every moment felt painfully hollow. When night fell, I lay beside Henry, his steady breathing a reminder of his trust. It only deepened the ache in my chest. My mind raced, replaying the kiss that had changed everything. Guilt pressed against me, suffocating. But the memory of Daniel's touch was intoxicating. Impossible to escape. Unable to bear the turmoil, I slipped out of bed and onto the porch, where the night air offered a brief reprieve. Stars stretched endlessly above, distant and indifferent. I searched them for answers, but none came. The silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless echo of my thoughts. What had I done? How had I allowed myself to cross this line? There was no going back. I didn't know how long I stood there, drowning in regret and longing, when a hand touched my shoulder. I turned, startled, to see Daniel standing behind me. His face was tense, his eyes clouded with worry. My heart raced as he spoke, his voice low and restrained. "Riley, we need to talk." I nodded, knowing we couldn't avoid it any longer. Together, we walked into the shadowed garden, hidden from view by the towering trees. The damp earth beneath my feet and the scent of blooming flowers did little to ease the tension crackling between us. Daniel stopped and turned to face me, his gaze locking onto mine. "This shouldn't have happened," he began, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I can't pretend there's nothing between us. I've tried to ignore it, Riley, but it's no use. I don't know where we go from here, but we can't act like nothing has changed." His words struck me like lightning, igniting the fire I'd tried to extinguish. My throat tightened, and I struggled to find my voice. The weight of his confession hung in the air, demanding a response I wasn't sure I could give. The night seemed to hold its breath as we stood there, suspended between guilt and desire, knowing that whatever came next would change everything forever. The word struck me like a blow, sharp and undeniable. I knew he was right, but my voice faltered, leaving me staring at him, desperate for clarity. "We're standing on the edge of a precipice," I finally whispered, fear coiling tightly around me. "One wrong step, and everything falls apart. What do we do?" Daniel took a step closer, his hand brushing mine. The warmth of his touch sent a rush through me, but it carried the same uncertainty that churned inside me. "I don't know," he said softly, pain lacing every word. But I can't lose you. At the same time, I can't betray Henry. We need to figure this out. The weight of his words settled between us. We both knew we'd crossed a line that couldn't be erased. The question now was whether to sever this bond or embrace the path we'd stumbled onto. No matter the cost. The garden around us was silent. The night a quiet witness to our torment. My emotions churned, guilt, longing, fear, each one pulling me in a different direction. There's no going back, I said finally, my voice trembling. Daniel nodded, his gaze unwavering. But we can't stay here either. We need to move forward. Somehow. I hesitated, torn between logic and desire. Yet, in that moment, a truth became clear, no matter the obstacles. No matter the consequences. I couldn't let him go. I can't live without you, I confessed. The words breaking free like a dam collapsing. Tears burned in my eyes. But I didn't look away. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. We'll find a way, he said with quiet determination. But we have to be honest, with each other. With ourselves. And eventually, with everyone else. We can't hide forever. His words steadied me, giving me courage where I had none. This road would be fraught with pain and judgment. But the connection between us was undeniable. As we turned back toward the house, the silence between us felt different, charged with understanding and resolve. We both knew the truth, there was no undoing what had begun. Inside, I realized everything had changed. He wasn't just my father-in-law anymore. We had become something more. Something unshakable. No matter how impossible the road ahead seemed. We had made our choice. And there was no turning back. The next morning, I woke to a weight pressing heavily on my chest. Memories from the past few days, every charged moment with Daniel. Every kiss. Every unsaid word, swirled vividly in my mind. There was no more hiding from the truth, my feelings were undeniable. And they were consuming me. Henry had left for work early, leaving the house eerily quiet. Alone with Daniel. The atmosphere grew thick with unspoken tension. His presence was palpable. Each passing glance igniting sparks that neither of us dared acknowledge. I tried to distract myself, scrubbing plates and wiping counters. But my thoughts betrayed me. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft shuffle of his footsteps in the next room, sent my heart racing. I felt his eyes on me. And with each second, the invisible barrier between us seemed to crack, threatening to shatter completely. The tension became unbearable. It wasn't just in my head, it was in the air. A pulsing force drawing us together. Finally, I could take no more. Tossing the dishcloth aside, I turned and made my way to the living room. Daniel sat on the couch, his posture stiff, his hands clasped together as though holding himself back. When his eyes met mine, the intensity of his gaze rooted me to the spot. It wasn't just longing I saw, it was a mirror of my own torment. My own desire. Without a word, I walked toward him. The world around us seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of us in this charged moment. Daniel stood as I approached, the air between us vibrating with unspoken emotion. We were so close I could feel the heat of his body. His eyes searched mine, flickering down to my lips before rising again. My breath hitched as his hand brushed my shoulder, a touch so light it sent a jolt through me. In that instant, the tension broke. Our lips met. And the kiss was everything we had been holding back, raw, desperate, and unrelenting. My hands found his shoulders, clutching him like an anchor. His hands roamed my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. The kiss deepened, each moment erasing the doubts and fears that had kept us apart. Passion blazed between us, consuming everything in its path. Without breaking the kiss, Daniel lifted me into his arms. My arms wrapped around his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair as he carried me toward the bedroom. The hallway stretched endlessly, every step heightening the anticipation coursing through me. When we reached the room, he set me down gently, his hands lingering on my waist. The world outside ceased to exist. It was just us, wrapped in a moment we could no longer deny. Our lips met again, and this time there was no holding back. The fire that had been smoldering between us finally burned free. And for the first time, we surrendered completely to what had always been inevitable. When Daniel carried me to the bedroom, his touch was deliberate yet tender, igniting a spark in the dimly lit room. His eyes, deep and burning with passion, locked onto mine, silently promising me everything he had to give. As he hovered over me, I reached up, tracing the strong contours of his face. His skin was warm, grounding me in the intensity of this moment. When his lips met mine, the kiss was soft at first, a gentle brush that quickly deepened, becoming more fervent. His hands moved across my body, exploring as though memorizing every inch. And my heart raced as he trailed heated kisses down my neck and shoulders. Every touch, every kiss awakened something primal within me, a longing I could no longer suppress. I surrendered to him entirely, every nerve alive with sensations I couldn't control. His touch was both gentle and commanding, a balance that only fueled my desire. He moved with a confidence that left me breathless, every caress and whisper drawing us closer, erasing the space between us. The rhythm of our bodies became one, a dance guided by passion and unspoken emotions. His arms tightened around me as our breaths quickened, a symphony of shared desire filling the room. Time seemed to slow as we climbed higher together, the world outside disappearing, leaving only us. Then, like the explosion of fireworks, everything within and around us burst into vivid colors. My fingers gripped him tightly, and I felt his body tense as he reached the peak with me. The moment was infinite and fleeting, a collision of souls that left us both trembling. When it was over, we lay side by side, our hearts pounding in unison. The silence wasn't empty, it was filled with the weight of what had just happened. A connection that transcended words. I turned to him, my hand brushing against his face as I whispered, "We can't hide this anymore." He met my gaze, his voice steady as he replied, "I know." At that moment, everything changed. We couldn't go back, and neither of us wanted to. Whatever challenges awaited us, we would face them together, bound by a love that had become undeniable. As I rested my head against his chest, I felt the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that echoed my own. This wasn't just a moment, it was the start of something new, something unbreakable. And as I drifted to sleep, I knew our lives would never be the same. Several days had passed since that fateful moment when Daniel and I had crossed the threshold into something irrevocable, when we became one in both body and soul. That moment had been the culmination of months, maybe years, of an unspoken connection that had finally burst through the walls of restraint. It was a union we couldn't have foreseen but somehow always felt destined for. Yet, As intoxicating as that night was, it also marked the beginning of a new, fraught reality. The aftermath was a delicate and volatile terrain, and I knew instinctively that nothing would ever be the same. We continued to share the same house, living under the same roof as Henry. But the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Outwardly, life appeared unchanged. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. Henry, unsuspecting and trusting, carried on with his days, oblivious to the undercurrent of betrayal threading its way through our lives. His laughter, his casual touches, and even his presence became unbearable reminders of the deception we were fostering. Every moment spent with him felt like a lie. A charade in which I played a role I hadn't chosen but was forced to maintain. When Daniel and I were alone, the air between us felt charged, alive with both passion and peril. Our stolen moments together were electric, but they carried the weight of inevitability. We both knew the truth couldn't remain hidden forever. There was an unspoken understanding that the time would come when we would have to make a decision. One that could dismantle everything we had built with Henry. Yet, despite the looming threat, we clung to each other with a desperate fervor, savoring every minute as though it might be our last. One evening, as the house lay cloaked in silence and Henry's steady snores echoed faintly from the bedroom, I stepped out onto the porch. The night wrapped around me like a cool embrace, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze provided a fleeting solace. I inhaled deeply, trying to calm the storm within me. But my thoughts betrayed me. They circled back to Daniel, his touch, his voice, the undeniable connection we shared, and the uncertain future that awaited us. A fire burned within me, untamable and all-consuming, one that no amount of rationality could extinguish. I loved Daniel, but this love was no ordinary affair. It was a tempest, both exhilarating and destructive. As I stood lost in the labyrinth of my thoughts, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was him. His presence was as palpable as the night air around me. Daniel stepped closer, his hand grazing my shoulder, a touch so intimate yet so weighted with meaning that it sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to face him, and his eyes met mine, brimming with the same conflict, passion, and anxiety that churned within me. "We can't keep going like this," he murmured, his voice a low, steady current that carried the weight of our shared turmoil. "It's becoming too dangerous. Riley, we need to decide." His words, though soft, hit me with the force of a gale. He was voicing what I had been too afraid to confront, the inevitable reckoning we could no longer evade. "What do you suggest?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. Inside, I was a storm of emotions, torn between fear, love, and an overwhelming sense of loss for the stability I knew we were about to shatter. Daniel hesitated, his silence stretching like a taut thread that could snap at any moment. When he finally spoke, his words carried a raw honesty that was both heartbreaking and undeniable. "I think we need to tell Henry the truth," he said, his tone steady but laced with pain. My heart plummeted. The idea of confessing to Henry was something I had avoided contemplating, knowing it would unleash a torrent of pain and chaos. But Daniel's logic was undeniable. We couldn't live in this liminal space forever. "Do you understand what that would mean?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It will destroy everything." Daniel stepped closer, his hand finding its way to my cheek. His touch was warm, grounding, Yet it carried a heaviness that mirrored the gravity of our situation. "I know," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "But I can't live like this anymore. I love you. Riley. You mean everything to me. And I'm willing to risk everything to be with you." His words unraveled me. They were a bomb and a blow. A promise and a challenge all at once. As we stood there under the vast expanse of stars, I realized the depth of his commitment. And it terrified me. "I don't want to hide anymore either," I said at last, the words leaving my lips like a reluctant confession. "But I need time to think. We need to handle this carefully." Daniel nodded, his eyes softening with understanding. He pulled me into an embrace, and I felt his arms encircle me, his strength a shield against the chaos of the world. In that moment, I felt a fragile peace. But I knew it was fleeting. In the days that followed, I wrestled with the enormity of what we were about to do. Each time I resolved to speak to Henry, the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the betrayal? How could I justify the choices that had led us here? The weight of these questions was suffocating. And Daniel, sensing my turmoil, gave me the space I needed. Yet, the sadness in his eyes was unmistakable. Our stolen moments together grew more bittersweet, tinged with the knowledge that they might soon come to an end. One afternoon, while Henry was away on business, Daniel approached me with a quiet resolve I hadn't seen before. Without a word, he took my hand, leading me to the bedroom. I followed, my heart pounding in anticipation and trepidation. There, in the sanctity of our hidden world, we surrendered to the fire that had been smoldering between us, knowing it could be one of our last moments together before the truth unraveled everything. This was our moment, fragile and fleeting, and we couldn't let it slip away. Daniel quietly closed the bedroom door behind us, his movements deliberate, as though sealing us in a sanctuary where the outside world couldn't reach. The tension in the air seemed to dissolve, replaced by an aching tenderness. He pulled me into his arms, and when our lips met, it wasn't just a kiss, it was a silent promise, a resolve to stay together, no matter the cost. As we lay together on the bed, his hands moved with a tenderness that belied the hunger in his touch, peeling away the barriers of fabric between us. I surrendered completely, not just to him but to the depth of our connection. Every kiss, every touch was an unspoken affirmation of what we meant to each other. It wasn't merely physical, it was the melding of two souls who had braved storms and found solace in one another. In that moment, the world outside ceased to exist, and we were utterly, entirely one. Daniel's birthday had been planned as a simple, intimate evening, just the three of us. Our home, a paradoxical space of refuge and secrets, had become a stage where emotions simmered beneath the surface. From the very moment I awoke that day, I felt an unshakable unease, as though something monumental and irreversible was on the horizon. Yet, I pushed the feeling aside, determined to focus on my plan. I wanted to give Daniel a gift that would transcend the ordinary, something that would capture everything I'd held back, all the emotions I had buried deep within me. The idea struck me suddenly, a spark of inspiration that felt as inevitable as it was audacious. I ventured out to find the perfect token of my passion. The store was filled with an array of provocative costumes, but my gaze fell upon a latex outfit with a short skirt and a mask. It was bold, daring, and unmistakably symbolic. I knew that when Daniel saw me in it, he would understand everything I couldn't put into words. I purchased it, tucked it away in my closet, and penned a brief note for Daniel, detailing when and where he should meet me. Slipping the note into his bag, I felt a rush of anticipation and a twinge of anxiety. It was a gamble, but one I was willing to take. The evening unfolded as planned, almost too perfectly. We gathered around the table, celebrating Daniel's birthday with a quiet meal. Henry, ever the raconteur, filled the room with laughter, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents that ran beneath the surface. Daniel appeared calm, but I caught the glimmer in his eyes that mirrored my own, a shared secret, a silent understanding. Just as I began to believe we might pull off the evening without incident, the fragile equilibrium shattered. Henry casually mentioned needing some important documents he had stored in Daniel's bag. My heart skipped a beat. I watched as he left the room to retrieve them, my mind racing. Could he find the note? The thought barely had time to take root before he returned, his face impassive but his words heavy. "I need to leave tonight. Something urgent has come up," he announced, his tone clipped and final. His departure was abrupt, his kiss on my cheek a hollow gesture. And just like that, he was gone, leaving Daniel and me alone. The silence that followed was suffocating. I couldn't shake the sense that Henry's sudden exit was more than it seemed. The tension between Daniel and me grew, our shared anxiety unspoken but palpable. Later that night, as the house settled into an eerie stillness, I donned the outfit I had chosen with such care. It was time. If we had a chance to seize our moment, it was now. Daniel's eyes lit up when I entered the bedroom. The intensity of his gaze sent a shiver down my spine. I began to move. Every step and gesture an expression of the passion I had kept bottled up for so long. It was liberating, intoxicating, a release of everything we had been forced to suppress. He reached for me, and I felt the weight of the world dissolve in his embrace. But then the door burst open. The sound was sharp and jarring, slicing through the intimacy of the moment. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Standing in the doorway was Henry. His face was a mask of fury and pain, his eyes dark and accusing. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. "What is going on here?" His voice was low, a dangerous growl that sent a chill down my spine. Daniel sprang from the bed, his expression shifting from shock to grim resignation. There was no escape, no denying what Henry had just witnessed. "You betrayed me," Henry roared, launching himself at Daniel with a ferocity I had never seen before. His fists flew, each blow fueled by anger and heartbreak. Daniel tried to defend himself, but it was clear he held back, unwilling to inflict harm on his son. The room became a battleground of raw emotion, and I could only watch in horror as the two men I loved tore each other apart. Finally, Henry delivered a shove so forceful that Daniel crumpled to the floor. I rushed to his side, but Henry's outstretched arm stopped me in my tracks. His voice was eerily calm when he spoke, his words a death knell for the life we had known. "Get out. Both of you. I never want to see you again." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. With heavy hearts and shattered spirits, Daniel and I gathered what little we could and left the house. The night seemed darker than usual, its silence oppressive. As we drove away, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. We had lost everything: our family, our home, our peace. All that remained was the bitter aftermath of choices that could never be undone. Daniel drove in silence, his face an unreadable mask. I searched for something in his expression, anger, sadness, anything, but found only a void. Words felt futile. Each unspoken thought hanging heavy in the air between us. We had crossed a line. And there was no going back. Our world had crumbled, leaving us adrift in the wreckage of our decisions. As the car carried us into the unknown, I clung to one fragile hope, that in each other, we might still find a way to heal, to rebuild, to survive. We drove for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic thrum of the tires against the asphalt blending into a monotonous, almost hypnotic backdrop. It was as though we were trying to outrun the shadows of the past, pushing forward in a desperate attempt to leave behind the wreckage of everything we once held dear. Yet no matter how far we went, the weight of the events that had unfolded clung to us like an unshakable fog, suffocating and unrelenting. Each mile seemed to deepen the chasm of silence between us. The tension in the air so thick it felt as though it might shatter us entirely. Somewhere along the way, it dawned on me that this drive was more than just an escape from the past, it was a flight from each other. The bond that had once tethered us, a bond we had thought unbreakable, was now unraveling. Thread by thread. I glanced sideways at Daniel, his face a stony mask of concentration as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the leather. It struck me that I no longer recognized him, just as I no longer recognized the person I had become. What had once been a shared journey now felt like two solitary paths running parallel, never to intersect again. When we finally pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of a town I couldn't name, I felt no relief. The building was utterly unremarkable. A beige rectangle half hidden by the dim light of a flickering neon sign. It was perfect in its anonymity, a place where no one would ask questions or look too closely. Daniel stepped out of the car without a word, his movements heavy and deliberate. I followed, my body moving as if on autopilot, weighed down by an overwhelming emptiness that had hollowed me out completely. Inside, the motel's reception area was dimly lit and sterile, with a faint smell of cleaning products masking something stale. Daniel handled the check-in process with cold efficiency, his voice a monotone as he exchanged pleasantries with the clerk. I stood a few paces behind, feeling like a ghost observing someone else's life. When we entered our room, the oppressive atmosphere of the building seemed to amplify. The walls were an uninspired beige, the furniture functional but lifeless. It wasn't a home, it wasn't even a haven. It was merely a hiding place, from the world, from each other, from ourselves. The night stretched on interminably. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, the gulf between us more than just physical. I stared up at the ceiling, its cracked paint forming patterns that my mind tried to make sense of. Anything to distract from the storm raging inside me. Sleep remained elusive, the relentless replay of recent events cutting into my consciousness like shards of broken glass. My last conversation with Henry replayed in a loop, his words filled with a venom that stung anew each time. The bitterness in his voice, the betrayal etched into his expression, it was all too much, yet impossible to forget. By morning, the thin sunlight filtering through the threadbare curtains did little to dispel the darkness that had settled within me. Daniel left early, mumbling something about work. I watched him go, his departure feeling like the final unraveling of the fragile thread that still connected us. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed in my mind, a punctuation mark on the growing void between us. The days that followed blurred into one another, a monotonous cycle of solitude and despair. I remained confined to the four walls of that soulless motel room, unable to muster the energy to leave. My world had shrunk to this tiny, suffocating space, where the silence was deafening and the memories unrelenting. Henry's face haunted me, his eyes a mixture of anger and sorrow. A reflection of the damage I had caused. I had destroyed his life. And the guilt was a weight I could neither lift nor bear. On the third day, an envelope arrived. Its contents as devastating as they were expected. The divorce papers were impersonal, filled with cold legal jargon that belied the emotional wreckage they represented. But it was the letter that accompanied them that delivered the final blow. Riley, you no longer exist to me. I don't want to see you or him ever again. We are finished. Forget about me as I will forget about you. The words struck with a force that left me gasping, as though the air had been sucked from the room. In that moment, something inside me shattered irrevocably. Henry was gone. Not just physically but emotionally. And his departure left a void that seemed to expand endlessly. This was the end, a cold, final severance that offered no room for reconciliation or redemption. Daniel returned that evening. But he was a shadow of the man I had once known. His presence was as distant and muted as the pale moonlight filtering through the window. We exchanged few words, each of us retreating further into our own private anguish. The once intimate connection we had shared now felt like a distant memory, eroded by the tidal wave of pain and regret that had swept over us. He began leaving more frequently, his absences growing longer and more pronounced. I knew he was running, not just from me but from the unbearable weight of everything we had lost. I tried to bridge the chasm between us, to reach out and grasp what was slipping away. But each attempt was met with silence or evasion. The walls of the motel seemed to close in around me, a suffocating reminder of my isolation. I wandered the room aimlessly, a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. The days stretched into weeks, each one an echo of the last, filled with an unbearable stillness that seemed to magnify my despair. Eventually, I realized that Daniel's departures were more than just temporary escapes. They were the prelude to his inevitable exit from my life. I could see it in the way he avoided my gaze, in the way his touch had become a mere formality. The realization was a dagger to my heart. But it was also a strange relief. At least now I understood the path we were on, even if it led to nothing but emptiness. The night I finally accepted this truth, I sat alone in the silence of that lifeless room, tears streaming down my face. Everything I had cherished was gone: family, love, the future I had once dreamed of. All that remained was the void, vast and unyielding. And in that void, I saw the reflection of my own shattered soul. One evening, when Daniel had once again left without a word, I sat alone in the room. The silence, once merely an absence of sound, now pressed on me with an almost physical weight, closing in from every direction. It was suffocating, a heavy blanket of loneliness that I couldn't shake off. The walls seemed closer, the air colder. The emptiness of the space around me mirrored the hollowness growing inside my chest. I felt as though I couldn't breathe, unable to bear the confinement any longer. I stepped outside, craving the sensation of fresh air against my skin. The night was cool, and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind should have been comforting. But even in the midst of nature's embrace, solace evaded me. The trees, their branches swaying gently under the moonlight, felt like silent witnesses to my despair. The stars above, distant and indifferent, only heightened the overwhelming sense of isolation. I wrapped my arms around myself. Not because of the cold, but because I couldn't bear the fragility I felt in that moment. When I returned to the room, the stillness was more oppressive than before. Daniel was still gone. And with each passing minute, the ache of his absence deepened. I sank onto the bed, my gaze fixed on the door as though willing it to open. Hours dragged on, each second stretching unbearably long. Yet the door remained closed. A slow realization began to settle in my mind. Its weight unbearable, he wasn't coming back. It was as though a thread connecting us had been severed, leaving me adrift in a sea of sorrow. The pain of this understanding struck me like a physical blow, and I clutched my chest as if to hold the pieces of my shattered heart together. Days passed, each one bleeding into the next, a monotonous blur of waiting and despair. The room, which had once felt like a refuge, now felt like a prison. I listened obsessively for any sound outside the door, hoping, praying, for the faintest echo of his footsteps. But all I heard was the eerie quiet that had become my constant companion. The hope I clung to began to crumble, each moment of silence chipping away at its fragile foundation until there was nothing left but the bitter truth: he was gone. Desperation drove me to action. One morning, fueled by a need for answers, I left the motel and began searching for Daniel. I visited every place we had shared, from the coffee shop where we laughed over shared secrets to the park where we once sat in comfortable silence. But each familiar spot was void of his presence, like a photograph with him erased. It felt as though he had been swallowed by the earth, leaving no trace behind. My chest tightened with every failed attempt, the void inside me growing larger with every step. When I returned to the motel that evening, exhaustion weighed me down. But something on the table caught my eye: a letter. The envelope plain and unassuming. My hands trembled as I opened it. Daniel's familiar handwriting greeting me like a ghost. His words, though carefully chosen, were as devastating as they were final. Riley, I'm sorry. I can't continue this. Our paths have diverged, and I no longer see a future for us. Please don't try to find me. Everything we shared is now a part of the past. I hope you'll understand someday. Goodbye. The letter slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. I stared at it, unblinking, as though doing so might change the words written there. But they remained, stark and unyielding, a painful testament to the end of what once was. Tears blurred my vision, and a sob rose unbidden from my throat. This was the end I had feared, but its arrival felt no less devastating. I couldn't stay. The room, now tainted with memories of us, became unbearable. Every object seemed to mock me with echoes of happier times. Gathering my belongings, I packed hastily, avoiding any lingering glances that might root me to the spot. When I left the motel, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The streets were unfamiliar, their anonymity a small comfort as I wandered aimlessly. The city's lights, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed cold and distant. It was as though the world had shifted, leaving me behind. The ache in my chest was a constant reminder of all I had lost, an unrelenting weight that no amount of walking could shake off. Eventually, I found a small apartment on the other side of town. It was modest, almost barren, but it offered me the anonymity I craved. Yet, even in this new space, I couldn't escape the shadows of my past. Every morning, I awoke with the same gnawing emptiness. The days felt heavy, each one dragging me further into a pit of regret and self-recrimination. I thought often of what had brought me here. My choices, my mistakes, played on a relentless loop in my mind. I destroyed the very things that once gave my life meaning. The guilt was suffocating, an ever-present specter that haunted my every waking moment. I wondered, sometimes aloud, what might have been if I had chosen differently. But such musings brought no comfort. The past was immutable, and I was left to grapple with its aftermath. I tried to distract myself with work, throwing myself into the search for a job. But nothing seemed to stick. Each position I found felt hollow, meaningless. The monotony of it all only amplified my despair. I moved through life like a ghost, unseen and untouched by the world around me. Loneliness wrapped itself around me like a second skin, and I began to believe that this was my fate. One evening, after yet another fruitless day, the weight of it all became too much. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest as tears streamed down my face. The sobs came uncontrollably, a torrent of anguish that I could no longer contain. For hours, I cried, the pain spilling out of me in waves. But even as the tears dried, the emptiness remained. The nights were the worst. My dreams were plagued by images of Daniel and Henry, their faces etched with disappointment and sorrow. In these nightmares, they turned away from me, their backs retreating into the darkness. I woke each time with a start, my heart pounding, my throat raw from screaming. The loneliness was palpable, an ever-present reminder of the life I had shattered. Time passed, though I hardly noticed. The days blurred together, each one as bleak as the last. But somewhere, deep within me, a faint ember of determination flickered. I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but I also knew that I couldn't remain in this limbo forever. Step by step, I would have to find a way to piece myself back together. For now, though, all I could do was breathe and take it one moment at a time. One quiet afternoon, as the sun cast soft golden hues through the curtains of my apartment, I sat alone on the worn couch that had borne witness to countless restless nights. The stillness was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building or the distant hum of traffic below. It was in that solitude, with nothing but the weight of my thoughts for company, that I came to a stark realization: I couldn't continue like this. The life I was leading felt like a shadow of what it once was, a fractured reflection of a better time. Something had to change. I needed to break free from the chains of my past, confront my mistakes, and rebuild. But as much as I told myself that, the thought of actually doing it seemed insurmountable. The first step, I knew, was seeking help, a thought that both terrified and comforted me. After weeks of deliberation, I mustered the courage to call a therapist and schedule an appointment. That small action, though simple on the surface, felt monumental, as if I were cracking open a door that had long been sealed shut. The first session was excruciating. I sat in the chair, struggling to meet the therapist's gaze. My words caught in my throat. Each question she asked felt like it peeled back a layer of armor I had built around my heart. Talking about the pain, about how I had lost everything I once held dear, was like reopening a wound that had never truly healed. But as the sessions progressed, I began to open up, albeit hesitantly. I spoke of my fears, of how I feared the person I had become, of how the weight of my past choices pressed on me like an unbearable load. I shared how I had allowed ambition to overshadow gratitude, How I had betrayed the very people who had loved me most. And how I was left with nothing but regret. My therapist, with her gentle yet unyielding presence, helped me see that while I couldn't rewrite the past, I could learn to live with its echoes. She explained that the very act of wanting to change, to start anew, was a profound step toward healing. But for that change to take root, I had to confront the hardest task of all, forgiving myself. Self-forgiveness, I learned, is not an act of weakness but an act of immense courage. The process was long and tumultuous, fraught with moments of despair. Nights would come when I lay awake, replaying every mistake in vivid detail, my heart heavy with the realization of the hurt I had caused. I would often break down, questioning whether I even deserved a second chance. Yet, amidst the darkness, there were fleeting moments of hope, small yet powerful. Perhaps it was the warmth of the sun on my face during an early morning walk or the soothing rhythm of rain against the windowpane. These little moments reminded me that life, despite its pain, still had beauty to offer. Gradually, imperceptibly at first, I began to change. The sharp edges of my pain dulled, replaced by a quiet resilience. I realized that while my past would always be a part of me, it didn't have to define me. My mistakes could serve as lessons, not as a lifelong sentence. With this newfound perspective, I decided to take small but meaningful steps toward a fresh start. I found work at a cozy cafe tucked away in a corner of the city, a place where no one knew my name or my history. It became my sanctuary, a space where I could immerse myself in the simplicity of brewing coffee and exchanging kind words with strangers. In this little cafe, I began to rediscover joy in the mundane, the scent of freshly ground beans, the comforting hum of conversation, the delicate steam rising from a cup of tea. These moments, though ordinary, felt like lifelines, grounding me in the present and pulling me away from the shadows of my past. Slowly but surely, I began to let my guard down, allowing myself to trust again, not just in others but in life itself. It wasn't a smooth journey, setbacks and doubts continued to surface. Yet, with each day, I found myself stronger, more willing to embrace the uncertainties of life. One of the most profound lessons I learned was the importance of patience, not just with the process but with myself. Healing, I discovered, is not a race, it is a slow, deliberate journey. There were moments when I wanted to rush toward a resolution, to find some instant cure for my guilt and grief. But life doesn't work that way. Real transformation happens in the quiet, unremarkable moments, the mornings when I woke up and decided to try again, the evenings when I chose hope over despair. Eventually, I found peace, not a perfect, unshakable peace, but a tentative one, built on acceptance and resilience. I came to understand that my past, with all its flaws and failures, was just one chapter of my story, not the entire narrative. Mistakes are a part of being human. They can destroy us if we let them. But they can also teach us, shape us, and lead us toward a better version of ourselves. Looking back now, I see my mistakes not as the end but as a turning point, a painful but necessary catalyst for growth. My advice to anyone reading this is simple: cherish what you have. Don't let ambition or fleeting desires blind you to the beauty of the present. Passion is a powerful force, but it must be tempered with wisdom and gratitude. If I could go back and choose differently, I would. But the past is unchangeable. What we do have is the ability to learn, to grow, and to start anew. My journey is far from over. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. The light at the end of the tunnel is no longer just a distant glimmer, it is a guiding star, reminding me that even after the darkest night, a new dawn will come. As Riley sat by the window of her modest apartment, watching the sunrise cast its golden hues across the city, she felt a fragile sense of peace. The journey to this moment had been tumultuous, marked by passion, heartbreak, and irreparable choices. She had lost everything she once held dear, her family, her trust, and a part of herself. Yet, through the ashes of her past, she had found something invaluable: clarity. The love she and Daniel shared had been intense, consuming, but ultimately unsustainable. It taught her the harsh reality of how fleeting and dangerous unchecked emotions could be. Her mistakes had devastated those she loved most, but they also forced her to confront her flaws, to embrace her brokenness, and to find the strength to start anew. Riley now knew the importance of living with integrity, cherishing the relationships that ground us, and resisting the pull of momentary desires that can uproot an entire life. She had learned that true love is not about taking, it's about giving, understanding, and sacrificing for what truly matters. To anyone walking a similar tightrope, her story is a reminder: passions and temptations may burn brightly, but they often leave behind scars that take a lifetime to heal. Value what you have before it's too late. The trust of those who love you is a treasure, and once broken, it may never be restored. With every ending comes a beginning. Riley's steps forward may be slow, but they are deliberate. She knows her path will not be easy, but she is ready to embrace the light of a new dawn, one step at a time. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our next captivating tale. Let's continue this journey together. Your support means the world to us.